This is by a person called Mr. Bet. Why I stopped listening to Joe Rogan. There's an Aberrant Preach one also I want to watch, but let's watch this one quickly. I want to see what this guy's talking about because, unfortunately, I'm starting to get to that point too. I'm starting to get to that point too. I'm
Mr. Beat, and I have another confession to make. I used to be a really big fan of Joseph James Rogan. Like, a really big fan.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
Yeah, that's the guy. Joe Rogan, the comedian, actor, UFC commentator, reality TV host, and most famously, podcaster. I'm serious, William. I loved him. I loved him like dogs love to smell dog pee. Okay, maybe that was a weird metaphor, but for a period of about 8 years of my life, I was constantly listening to Joe's podcast.
Same.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
And the elites themselves believe they're racing using human technology to try to take our best minds and build some type of breakaway civilization where they're going to merge with machines.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan Experience. During those 8 years,
By the way, that's peak Joe Rogan. That little clip there of Alex Jones is what Joe Rogan Experience used to always be about, right? Conspiracy theories, nutty fucking news, societal observations, maybe a sprinkling of fucking politics, but nothing crazy. Even back then, because he was less annoying, you didn't mind his comedy talk. Haven't you figured that out? I think I figured that out recently. Like, I didn't mind all the inside baseball, the comedy store, doing your bits, sets and reps talk, because they were less annoying. But nowadays, I can't even listen to them talk about their jobs because it's fucking pissing me off. But back then, I didn't mind it if they spoke about how many times they go over their fucking shitty jokes. Maybe it helped because we didn't really know how bad they were. Because I think back then I wasn't watching specials, I'm not going to lie. I don't think I watched a single special of his back then. I completely ignored the side of him doing comedy. But I didn't mind hearing him speak about it because I actually liked him.
pretty much listened to every single episode. Well, other than the UFC and Fight Companion episodes. I couldn't care less about mixed martial arts. But yeah, that's thousands of hours of my life listening to this.
These monkeys, these apes rather, started consuming psilocybin mushrooms, and it led them to be more creative.
And I wasn't the only one, dude. There are others. The Joe Rogan Experience is one of the most popular and influential media programs in history. I'm sure you've heard of it. I mean, that's probably why many of you clicked on this video to watch. For many years...
Yo, big up your vibes. What's going on? I'm going to be nice. What do you mean? What's this about? I'm going to be nice. Please unpause the stream. I think maybe something happened earlier. Big up Two Swords. He looks alpha as fuck. I think Two Swords is being sarcastic there, but I'm not too sure. Big up Ryan Harty. This is very true. Joe Rogan not being able to make money for 2 weeks during the pandemic changed him. Ain't that but a bitch? Ain't that but a bitch?
It was the #1 podcast around. And remember, there are like literally millions of podcasts out there. Like, even my great-grandfather has a podcast. And he's dead. Hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people at this point have listened to at least one episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. It's helped launch the careers of countless guests and dominated the culture, helped presidents get elected. I listened to Joe Rogan so much.
Big up King Bayo. The bin was filtered down. Exactly, yeah. Big up A. Martinez. No lie, me and the homies used to link up to listen to Alex Jones episodes. We smoke hella weed and listen and laugh and listen intently. It's so insufferable now. Yeah, thank you for saying that, bro. Thank you for saying that. I remember there was a time when I used to have people, you'd go to people's houses and they'd be playing in the background. I don't know if I ever sat with people, but I remember it'll be playing in the background. It'll be playing in the fucking background as just like background noise, and you maybe listen to it here and there. Nowadays, if you tell somebody, I don't know about you guys if you're out there fucking actively dating, but I think nowadays if you tell someone you listen to Joe Rogan, that might fuck up your chances of getting some action. Like, it's now like a red flag. Like, what? You know, people are going to judge you, like, negatively for listening to this guy.
Much shit felt like he was legit an actual friend of mine. You're looking at a picture taken of me and a woman who, for some strange reason, married me. You may know her as Mrs. Beat. This picture was taken in 2014, and if you asked Mrs. Beat what she thought of Joe Rogan at that time, she probably would have rolled her eyes and said that she was annoyed that I constantly brought him up in every conversation we had. Oh, that reminds me of the Joe Rogan episode I was listening to the other day. Oh man, you should check out the latest episode of Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan had a guy on who thinks he's seen Bigfoot 6 times. Joe Rogan says we should take more vitamin D to increase our life expectancy.
Matt, shut up about Joe Rogan.
For people who are watching who may think that I'm making this up, convince them that I actually was a really big Joe Rogan fan.
In preparing for this, I searched Joe Rogan in my email on August 14th, 2013. You were excited that he might do meet and greets and you were wanting to meet him.
But eventually Mrs. Beat got into him too. I even convinced her to let me spend way too much money to see him perform his stand-up comedy live in Kansas City back in 2018. But by 2020, my perception of Joe Rogan had...
Yeah, he's more of a fan than I was. I would never go see him perform stand-up comedy. I'm not gonna lie. He's way more of a Rogan fan than I am. I was listening from the outs. I was listening from afar, and spending way too much time on the Reddit. Fucking hell, he actually paid to go watch Joe Rogan perform stand-up. Fucking hell.
Had begun to change. I found myself skipping episodes more and more. I found myself getting annoyed with him more and more. By the end of 2021...
Fucking hell. Yo, Austin Casey? Austin Casey? Austin Casey? Sir, please. Oh my god. Oh my god. You know what's wild too? That's like an Asad Aziz comment, innit? That's something Asad Aziz will say. No one will be surprised if Asad Aziz says something like that. Even Young Old Vibes. You'll be surprised, innit? Young Old Vibes, Asad Aziz. There's some people in the stream chat. You wouldn't be surprised if said something like that. But you'd be terribly surprised if you saw the name that was listed next to that wild comment that I'm not going to repeat. But if you saw it, you saw it. Oh my god, bro. Oh my god. Mr. B, the thoughts and comments of my stream chat do not reflect me, okay? Do not reflect me. You're beautiful people.
I had stopped listening to him altogether. The parasocial relationship I had with him was over. In this video, I'm gonna explain why I stopped listening to Joe Rogan. I'm excited to say that this video is once...
come on, bro. Come on.
Go. Turn off their...
Come on, bro.
Off.
Yeah, you're complaining about Rogan and you're out here shilling fucking food service delivery. Like, who eats this slop anyway, man?
Thanks to...
Come on, bro.
I tuned into The Tonight Show to watch Jay Leno interview one of my favorite politicians of all time, Ron Paul. If you don't know, Paul was a popular congressman from Texas running for president.
Hold on. Is that a picture of him making his baby watch Joe Rogan on the laptop like that? Wow. It's not Joe Rogan, something else, but God almighty, man. Poor baby. Being indoctrinated from birth, like, what the fuck?
Ron Paul. If you don't know, Paul was a...
I'm not gonna lie. If Rogan finds out this guy's not his fan anymore, I don't think Rogan's gonna be upset. I think this is one fan that Rogan might, he won't mind losing.
Popular congressman from Texas running for president at the time. And to my surprise, out comes Joe Rogan to enthusiastically endorse Ron Paul for president. I truly did not see this coming. You see, before December 16th, 2011, I didn't really like Joe Rogan at all. I knew him from two things, mainly. News Radio and Fear Factor. And his appearances in both of those shows did not convince me to like him. In fact, I thought he was annoying at best and obnoxious at worst on Fear Factor. I couldn't stand the guy. But then here he is on Jay Leno endorsing my boy, Ron Paul. And I was like, maybe I should revisit this Joe Rogan fella. Soon after this, I noticed his podcast was one of the most popular podcasts in the world, so I gave it a try. I was hooked. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was rough. This was back when Brian Redband was on the program producing the audio.
Yeah, big up Ed Martinez.
I replaced JRE with the random show.
Yeah, we RS gang in the chat. Well, go on, RS gang in the chat. Big up, Abe Martinez. Appreciate you.
Joe had issues.
We have 2 commercials that we do. Oh, good. I don't know how to use Windows, little Jimmy. We just switched over to Windows.
Many of his guests seemed to be under the influence of drugs. Many of them didn't know what the heck they were talking.
I think I might start doing that actually. I think I might, as a little throwback, a little nod to the old school days. I think I need to add one of these little bars, these little banners at the bottom, of my streams going forward. I think I'm gonna do that.
About half the time, but they were having fun, man. Good vibes and good open-minded people. And I felt like I was eavesdropping on some really intriguing conversations.
Okay.
Plus, it was like a peek behind the curtain before podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience, where you rarely got such intimate glimpses into the private lives of big-time Hollywood celebrities.
Yo, the chokehold fleshlights had on the Rogan Experience were crazy, innit? Looking back at it, like, have any of you guys in the stream chat ever used one? I always thought the fucking, obsession with fleshlights to be super weird, man. That was a mad era in Rogan history. The fleshlights era. I wonder if they actually made him a millionaire. Or no, he was a millionaire before that probably. But I wonder if fleshlights fucking partnership really did contribute to his wealth. They kind of did lay some groundwork there, because he was pushing those things super hard. Like, he was banging into porno as well, always interviewing porn stars and shit.
Celebrities.
Joe Rogan was Adam 22 before Adam 22.
Got even more into the podcast when Joe started inviting guests who are outside of his circle of comedian and MMA friends. He started having actual experts in specialized fields on. Doctors, journalists, scientists. But here's the thing. Whenever Joe had guests on who were experts in specialized fields, he didn't pretend to know more than them. He showed humility.
Yo, big up, who's this? Big up Mind Nuts. Can we get a Z stream on the vitamins? Yeah, that's coming next month. That's coming. Now, I'll probably do it on Taz though, but that's coming next month. That's fucking coming next month. And be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for.
Shut up and let them talk. When he did talk, he often asked questions. And here's the most important part. Joe was curious. In those early years, Joe let his own curiosity guide each and every interview.
To be fair, I think the curious thing is a little bit overused. I hear everybody keep saying it. Oh, you need to be curious. You need to be curious. Not even that. He was just open-minded. I guess curiosity is a form of being open-minded, but he was more so open-minded than he was curious. He was still like, he had these positions that he held, strongly, but he was open-minded to other things, like, and he willing to have that conversation. And he also believed in like having people on that maybe disagreed with him. Nowadays, it's like, I understand he's more politically involved now and whatever, but like, please, like, for the love of God, have somebody on that's a little bit of a lefty. Please, bro. Just to kind of balance things up a bit. Like, I get it. You're in this conservative tip now. You made a lot of money, which tends to happen to people when they make a lot of money. They tend to maybe lean a little bit more right. But just for the benefit of the show, get somebody on that's like a super liberal lefty, please. Just to kind of balance things. Or somebody that's not so much in love. Even if he gets, no, forget that. Even if he was to get on a conservative who's not the biggest fan of Trump, that would even make things a little bit more entertaining to listen to. Because nowadays it's just unbearable to listen to, because everybody's that he has on there is like some sort of like hedge fund millionaire who also loves Trump. Like, it's like come on, man. Like, can we just talk? Can we go back to hunting, please? Do you remember when we used to hunt? Can we go back to hunting podcast, please? Is that possible? Can we maybe obsess about stand-up for like 2 hours and about the fucking beauty of the Comedy Store in Mitzi Shore?
He had people on whom he clearly disagreed with, but heard them out anyway. Sure, he still had stuff he passionately cared about, like the legalization of recreational drugs and UFOs. However, if he didn't know much about a topic, he shut his mouth and listened.
That multiverse might.
That weed thing was always a bit of a red flag, isn't it, right? Being a proponent of the legalization of marijuana, but then moving to Texas and getting what it feels like, because he had that Governor Abbott on his show. Weed is not legal in Texas, but he still smokes it. So most likely he gets some sort of special privileges. The police probably are aware of who he is. They let him do what the fuck he wants. So you want marijuana to be legalized, but you live in a state where it's not legalized and you get special privileges. A little bit stinky, that.
might be infinite and eternal.
Where are they?
Outside of our universe.
How's that even possible?
Of course it's possible.
I understand. I'm not questioning it.
Okay,
I just would like you
here's
to
one
define it. This idea that there's nothing or no thing, that we can't even wrap our head around nothing, because we would think of a thing, that there's no thing, but there's never a thing.
Right.
But how do we, or why don't we just say we don't know? I don't know enough about astrophysics, about space travel, about the science that's, the work that's been done, about how to get a rocket to the moon and back. I definitely don't know enough.
Now, I should say he also had people on who were not experts in their fields, but he believed them to be experts because he already wanted to believe in what they were saying. Also, when he did tend to have actual experts on, they tended to be experts who were just better at talking than most of their colleagues. It didn't mean they were more knowledgeable than their colleagues. They just could communicate the stuff better. And yeah, if he grew to like the experts, he'd invite them back on, and that expert would then proceed to often talk about stuff they clearly knew very little about. Despite all that, Joe was a likable person because he always seemed so down to earth and authentic. He wasn't constantly trying to push any agenda. He constantly admitted that he didn't know what he was talking about when it came to most things. By the way, that's all of us. All of us don't know much about almost everything. And that's okay.
I wonder if also part of the reason why Rogan went awry was when he started to believe the smart guy thing. I wonder. Remember everyone kept saying he was smart, and he would always like, no, I'm not. I just fucking retain a lot of dumb information. He'd kind of use that kind of line. But I feel like nowadays he doesn't push back against it anymore. He lets people tell him he's smart without any kind of like, self-deprecation or anything or clarification. No, it's not, I'm just maybe knowledgeable in one particular area. He kind of lets it go. So he's starting to believe, or he's starting to like the smell of his own farts. Maybe that was part of the reason why he went a bit awry. Maybe.
Overall, though, I just appreciated Joe's almost childlike curiosity and devotion to learning. As early as 2019, though, I did begin to notice that he tended to mostly have people on the show who he already agreed with, and if he disagreed with a guest, even if they were a friend, he'd push back a bit much further than I'd like. But things really went downhill for the show quickly during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, yes.
When's the first time you remember me saying something negative about Joe Rogan?
Well, that would be around the pandemic.
I swear, that pandemic broke so many people's brains.
You see what I mean about people and about things people say and the power of words. When she came on screen, the first thing I thought about was what Austin Casey said. Evil people we have in the stream chat. Evil people.
And don't get me wrong, I get it. It was a difficult and stressful time. Millions of people died. The lockdowns sucked. We had to sacrifice many of our freedoms. In my opinion, this especially seemed to upset a lot of privileged folks who weren't used to sacrificing their freedoms. But due to so many folks going through hard times during the pandemic, a lot of people indeed got more radicalized. That included many celebrities who then influenced millions of others to become more radicalized. And let me be clear here. When I say radicalized, all I mean is that they had views more radically different in opposition to the status quo. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have radicalized views. I mean, we do need to get radicalized if things get bad enough. Joe did not like the lockdowns and public health restrictions one single bit. He was absolutely devastated that he had to cancel all his shows and his fun plans. And throughout March and April of 2020, during those particularly restrictive times, he spent most of the time on his podcast complaining about how all of us couldn't just go where we wanted or do what we wanted.
They're treating everybody like babies. This is what it is, man. They're treating everybody like you're not allowed to make your own decisions, including business owners that have spent a ton of money opening up these outdoor cafes and outdoor restaurants, and then they don't even supply any science. There's not even they are essentially autocrats, right? They're a dictator.
Still, he stayed.
Anybody that doesn't let me do what I want to do is a dictator. I fucking love that jump. Provide me with the science, but would you even know what you're reading if I did provide it to you anyway? Like, I love how everybody turned into a fucking overnight virologist when COVID happened. I get the lockdown was annoying, and for the most part, some of the measures, maybe most of the measures, were inconsequential in the end. I think the vaccine was what really saved us. I don't think fucking social distances did anything, right? Fucking hell. Thinking back to COVID. Remember that fucking... Did you guys have it too in the States? You must have had it, right? Do you remember that thing everyone was doing with the pots and pans? Do you remember that? Do you remember that fucking nonsense? At a particular... I don't know what time of day it was in the evening. Maybe it was 6 p.m. You'd fucking open the window and everyone would be like banging their pots and pans in solidarity with like the healthcare workers or something. What? Like, honestly, looking back, man, we were on some bullshit, bro. We were on some bullshit, but it didn't radicalize me. I didn't suddenly, start saying some mad shit on the timeline about fucking Adolf Hitler and shit. You'll be Austin Casey.
Back in the day, Joe would approach interviews as if he didn't know anything, which would represent our viewpoint. The questions he asked would represent questions that we were thinking. Not anymore.
100% agree with that immensely, Austin Casey. And the other thing as well that I'm also thinking about is he was making a point. I also felt like back then, Rogan would like, maybe it's what you're saying. Rogan would approach the interviews like he's one of us, like he's the viewer, like just curious to find out more about the person they're interviewing. But now I feel like when he gets people on the show, it's like they are peers, like they're intellectual peers, like he's meeting somebody of the same level of intellect as he is, you know? And it's almost like a test to see who's going to come out smarter and more intelligent and have more, insightful opinions and different viewpoints, whatever. He's not approaching it from a point of that point. He's now approaching it from a point of authority, which is very strange. And kind of, this is probably what gives it this weird vibe it is at the moment, especially. And I also feel like nowadays he goes on way more of those rants. During interviews, he'd always go on those rants, talk about certain things to kind of, flex maybe some of his knowledge or whatever it may be. But I feel like he goes on those rants way more than he did in the past, man. It's fucking infuriating, really. But big up Austin Casey.
Curious, at least at the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, tell everybody what you do, Michael.
Well, thank you. I'm, for lack of a better term, a medical detective. I've spent my whole career tracking infectious diseases down, trying to...
This guy's basically an op now, isn't it? This guy was on the show, and for a brief period in time, he did kind of make Joe maybe consider some of his hard, crazy batshit opinions regarding COVID, but soon after, this guy became an op. I don't think he had him back since, to be honest.
to stop them, trying to understand where they come from so we can make sure they don't happen in the first place.
He had Dr. Michael Osterholm on, an internationally recognized expert in infectious diseases. You can go back and watch this episode. It is aged like wine. Holds up very well. Michael Osterholm is truly an expert. Nearly all of what he said was true and came true. Joe was receptive at the time, but in the back of his mind, you can probably guess he didn't want to hear any of it. 2 years later, Joe had him back on.
Oh, he did.
He was more combative against Osterholm.
Oh shit, he did have him back on. I didn't remember that. Wow. Yeah, see, I've been paying attention to Rogan, man. I didn't realize he had him back on. Shit.
This time, the second time Osterholm was on, I was astounded by how arrogant Joe seemed, despite the literal freaking experts across the table from him remaining humble.
Does the vaccine cause any pericarditis?
No,
or
none. We've
none?
seen zero. Zero cases. Zero
Really?
cases pericarditis, zero cases of arrhythmias. But the virus does it.
Zero. That's not what I read. I
it
read
is.
this whole thing about...
Who was it that he got his phone out and said, "I got all these papers, all these studies here"? Who was it? Do you remember? He did a really boomer thing, and he was maybe it was a Save Our Parks. He's like, "Yeah, I've got all these reports, all these papers, all everything is on here," and this massive Android. It's like, bro, relax, bro, relax.
About vaccinated people in Israel, like that there was a giant surge of vaccinated people.
No, the surge is primarily in unvaccinated people.
Yeah, he hasn't had him on ever since. But let's go back to the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic.
COVID-19!
COVID-19!
3 weeks after Joe had Michael Osterholm on, things had already gotten so bad that everyone was doing everything remotely, even Joe. His remote guest this time was someone he had on his show before, Dr. Peter Hotez, an internationally recognized expert on vaccines and tropical disease control. If you go back and watch the episode, again, practically every episode is still up. If you go back and watch it, you'll notice that Joe is still mostly trying to learn and staying quiet, but he's also visually frustrated.
How long can we go? I mean, if look, let's take economics out of it. What would you think if there was no concern whatsoever about economic loss and the damage to the economy? What would you recommend in terms of just from clearly
damage to the economy, damage to my wallet?
Just purely from a medical perspective.
While this episode has also aged like wine, Peter Hotez is also truly an expert who forecasted the pandemic and the response accurately. He later became the target of a backlash against pandemic restrictions. And yep, Joe hasn't had him on since. You see, Joe apparently thought he was done learning everything about the COVID-19 pandemic at that point, and he felt like he didn't need to teach his audience anything new about it either. Most of the COVID-19 coverage after this was reactionary. He didn't have experts on. He had just people who didn't know much about the virus or pandemic giving their opinions about it, backed up by little evidence. It was mostly comedians complaining about how their tours were canceled. And then on December 31st, 2021, Joe decides to have this guy on. Dr. Robert Malone used to be a respected doctor who helped make mRNA vaccines and furthered medicine research. However, the pandemic appeared to break his brain too. He began spreading a bunch of misinformation about the safety and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. He misrepresented data and used his credentials to gain quite a following online. By the end of 2021, Joe Rogan had already made up his mind about COVID-19 vaccines. He didn't like them. So when Joe found out about Malone, he seized at the opportunity to have him on the podcast to talk trash about them. And sure enough, Rogan's audience generally ate this misinformation right up. Well, this was the last straw for me. I haven't listened to Rogan ever since.
Wow.
Well, except for the Osterholm episode and the Mike Judge episode. What can I say? I love Mike Judge. Over the past 4 years...
Okay, fair play. Big up this guy. Check out his channel if you want to check it out. I want to quickly switch over to fucking Kill Tony and see what he's saying. But for me, I think it was just generally feeling like he's gone off the reservation. I don't really have a problem with him becoming conservative. I don't really give a fuck about people's political point of view. Doesn't really, change how I consume their content and whatnot. It's just become very hard to listen to JRE without also having to encounter Rogan's personality. And I feel like before, Rogan's personality took a bit of a back seat. His interests were obviously what they were, but I don't think his personality was as grating before. But now his personality is super grating, and he's a large part of the show, especially nowadays. He's always going on a lot more, like I said, rants and stuff. He takes up a lot more speaking time. He's not really giving guests the time to speak about what they want to speak about, or if anything, he starts to fucking he starts to fucking force the same talking points on each fucking guest, no matter what their field of expertise are. It kind of makes it hard to listen to. So that's why I've kind of stopped listening to it over time, because I just know what I'm going to get. I know because before it was like every comedian, you knew what you were going to get when you interviewed a comedian. But nowadays, even intellectuals, even fucking whatever, scientists, engineers, he'll be talking to them about COVID, cancel culture, about woke this, social media, Elon, Donald Trump. I'm just bored of those talking points. I really am bored. He doesn't seem to be bored of them or the sound of his own voice, so it's like a bad combination. So I just kind of leave it be. If there's an interesting guest on that I want to watch and I want to check out, of course I want to check it out. But for the most part, no thank you. Anyways, let's move on.